The cargo ship Wandering Star had seen better days. Cole knew every rattle, every groan, every stubborn bolt on the old vessel. He had been its mechanic for 7 years now, keeping the aging freighter alive through sheer willpower and creative repairs. The ship belonged to Captain Vex, a four-armed trader who valued profit over maintenance budgets. Wiped the grease from his hands as he crawled out from beneath the engine housing. The primary fuel injector had been acting up again, threatening to strand them in the middle of nowhere. He had fixed it with a piece of scrap metal, some wire, and a prayer to whatever gods watched over broke mechanics in deep space. "Cole," the intercom crackled with Captain Vex's gravelly voice. "Get to the bridge. We have a situation." Sighed and grabbed his toolkit. A situation usually meant something else was broken. He made his way through the narrow corridors of the ship, passing storage containers filled with various trade goods. The Wandering Star was not a pretty vessel, but it was home. The bridge was small and cramped, with consoles that flickered occasionally due to faulty wiring had not yet gotten around to fixing. Captain Vex stood at the center, his 4 arms crossed in what had learned to recognize as worry. The navigator, a named Chitter, was clicking rapidly at his station. "What's the problem?" asked. Vex pointed at the main. "We picked up a distress signal, automated, coming from that moon." Looked at the screen. The moon was gray and lifeless, orbiting a gas giant that dominated the view. There was nothing remarkable about it at first glance, but as he looked closer, he noticed something strange on the surface. Structures. Ancient structures that seemed to grow out of the rock itself. "Nobody lives out here," Chitter clicked. "This sector is unmarked. No colonies, no stations, nothing." "Yet someone built something down there," Vex said, "and they are calling for help." Felt a strange sensation in his chest. He could not explain it, but something about that moon pulled at him. It was like a memory he could not quite reach, a word on the tip of his tongue that refused to form. "We should investigate," said, surprising himself. Vex turned all 4 of his eyes toward him. "Since when does my mechanic give orders?" "I'm not giving orders, I'm making a suggestion. That signal could mean survivors, or salvage. Either way, it could be worth our time." Vex considered this. They were practical people, always calculating risk versus reward. After a long moment he nodded. "Fine, but if this is a trap, I'm leaving you behind." The shuttle was even older than the Wandering Star, a boxy vehicle that shook violently during atmospheric entry. Gripped his seat as the moon's thin atmosphere tried to tear them apart. Beside him sat the ship's security officer. She was a species known for their incredible strength and blue-tinted skin. She carried a plasma rifle and looked annoyed. "I hate moons," muttered. "Nothing good ever happens on moons." Did not respond. He was too focused on the view through the shuttle's small window. The structures were becoming clearer now. They were massive, towering spires of dark metal that twisted toward the sky like frozen flames. The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was not any of the 100 species that made up the Galactic Collective. The shuttle landed on a flat plain near the base of the largest structure. As stepped out, he felt the moon's weak gravity tug at him gently. The air was thin but breathable, filtered through the small mask he wore. The ground beneath his boots was covered in fine gray dust that had not been disturbed in what looked like thousands of years. "The signal is coming from inside," said, checking her scanner. "Deep inside. There's a massive underground complex beneath this structure." Approached the base of the spire. Up close, he could see intricate patterns carved into the metal. They were not decorative. They looked like circuits, pathways for energy that had long since stopped flowing. He reached out and touched the surface. The metal was warm. "That's impossible," whispered. "This moon has no geothermal activity, nothing to generate heat." "Maybe we should go back," said, her grip tightening on her rifle. "This feels wrong." But was already walking along the base of the spire, searching for an entrance. He did not know why, but he felt certain there was one, certain that it would open for him. It was a ridiculous thought. He was just a mechanic from Earth, a backwater planet that had only achieved interstellar travel 200 years ago. Humans were the newcomers to the galactic stage, often looked down upon by older species. Yet the feeling persisted. He found the entrance behind an outcropping of rock. It was a doorway, perfectly rectangular, sealed with a metal barrier covered in the same circuit-like patterns. There was no handle, no keypad, no obvious way to open it. Dead End said, "Let's go." Ignored her. He placed his palm flat against the door. Light exploded beneath his hand. The circuits lit up, blazing with golden energy that raced across the entire surface of the door. The patterns shifted, rearranged themselves, and then the door slid open with a sound like a sigh. Stumbled backward, raising her rifle. "What did you do?" "I don't know," said honestly. His heart was pounding. His hand tingled where it had touched the metal. "I just touched it." Beyond the door was a corridor that descended into darkness. But as stepped inside, lights activated along the walls. The same golden glow illuminated a path that led deep underground. The air inside was fresh, as if the ventilation systems had been waiting patiently for someone to arrive. "This is ancient technology," breathed. "Older than anything in the collective's records. It should be dead. Nothing works after this long." "It's not dead," said. "It's sleeping." They descended into the complex. The corridor branched into dozens of passages, but never hesitated. He took turns without thinking, following a path that felt familiar even though he had never been here before. Followed, increasingly nervous, her scanner showing readings that made no sense. "There's power everywhere," she said. "Massive amounts of energy. This place could run 100 worlds." The corridor finally opened into a vast chamber. Stopped, his breath catching in his throat. The chamber was circular, at least a kilometer across. The ceiling rose so high it disappeared into shadow, and at the center stood a structure that could only be described as a throne. It was made of the same dark metal as everything else, but it was covered in more intricate patterns than anything they had seen. Behind it, carved into the wall, was a symbol. A circle with a dot at its center, surrounded by rays that spread outward like a sun. "I know that symbol," whispered. "What?" Looked at him. "How could you possibly know it?" Walked toward the throne, his boots echoing in the vast space. "When I was a kid, I used to draw it, over and over. My parents thought I was just doodling, but it was always this exact symbol. I could never get it out of my head." He stopped before the throne. There was something written on the base, characters in a language he had never seen. Yet somehow, impossibly, he understood them. "For the heir who wanders among the stars," he read aloud. "For the child who was scattered among the worlds. For the seed of our people, planted in distant soil. When you return, all that was lost shall be found." Scanner beeped frantically. "Get away from there, something is happening." The circuits on the throne began to glow. The patterns spread across the floor, racing toward the walls, climbing toward the ceiling. The entire chamber was lighting up, power surging through systems that had been dormant for eons. Should have been afraid. He should have run. But instead, he felt a peace he had never known. He felt like he was finally where he was supposed to be. He whispered almost to himself, "I'm here." And then a voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere, deep and resonant, filling the chamber with sound that felt in his bones. "The heir has RETURNED." Dropped to her knees, overwhelmed by the sheer power in that voice, but stood firm. He looked up, searching for the source, and found that the symbol on the wall was now blazing with light. "Who are you?" he asked. "We are the ARCHITCTS. We built the stars. We seeded life across the cosmos. And when our time ended, we left pieces of ourselves in the species we CREATED. Humanity CARRIES our spark. You, MARCUS coal carry OUR blood." His mind reeled. Humanity, carriers of some ancient alien legacy. It was impossible. Humans were young, primitive compared to other species. They had barely mastered interstellar travel. "I'm just a mechanic," he said. "You've made a mistake." "There is no mistake. The door opened for you. The lights responded to your presence. The words on the throne revealed themselves to your eyes. You are of our lineage, the last of the bloodline that can awaken what we left behind." The chamber shuddered. More systems were coming online, more power flooding through the ancient complex. Could feel it now, a connection to this place that went beyond logic or reason. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "We want nothing. We offer everything. This complex is one of 12 scattered across the galaxy. Together, they form the legacy of the ARCHITCTS. Technology beyond anything the current CIVLIZETUNS possess. Weapons, SHIELDS, ENGINES, medical advances that can cure any disease, energy sources that will never run dry. All of it waiting for the heir to claim it." Looked at his hands, grease-stained, calloused from years of manual labor. These were the hands of a mechanic, not an heir to some cosmic legacy. "Why now?" he asked. "Why did you wait so long?" "We scattered humanity across 100 worlds, seeding them into existing POPULATIONS, MIXING our blood with theirs. We knew it would take time for the right combination to emerge, for the pure spark to ignite. You are that spark, MARCUS Cole, the first in 10,000 years to trigger the awakening." Had recovered enough to stand, she approached cautiously, her rifle lowered but not put away. "What is happening? What is this thing?" "It's complicated," said. He turned back to face the blazing symbol. "If I accept this, if I claim this legacy, what happens?" "The choice is yours. You can walk away. The complex will sleep again, waiting for another generation. Or you can accept your inheritance, learn what we knew, become what we were, and lead humanity into a new age." Thought about his life, the endless repairs, the cramped quarters on the wandering star, the way other species looked at humans like they were children playing at being adults. He thought about Earth, struggling to find its place in a galaxy that had moved on without it. And he thought about what it would mean to change all of that. "I need time," he said. "I need to understand more before I make this decision." "Time is something we have in abundance. The complex will remain open to you. The knowledge we possess will begin to transfer to your mind, slowly, so as not to overwhelm you. When you are ready, you will know what to do." The light from the symbol dimmed, settling into a steady glow. The voice fell silent but could still feel its presence, vast and patient, waiting. Grabbed his arm. "We need to leave. We need to tell Captain Vex what we found." "No," said. "Not yet. If word gets out about this place, about what's here, every power in the galaxy will come for it. We need to be careful. We need a plan." "What kind of plan?" Looked around the chamber, seeing it with new eyes. He was beginning to understand the systems, the purposes behind the designs. Knowledge was trickling into his mind, pieces of a puzzle that would take years to complete. "I need to find the other 11 complexes," he said. "I need to understand the full extent of what the architects left behind, and I need to figure out what to do with it." Shook her head. "This is insane. You're a mechanic. Yesterday your biggest concern was a broken fuel injector." Smiled. It was a sad smile, the smile of a man whose life had just changed forever and who was not entirely sure it was for the better. "Yeah," he said. "I know, but I can't pretend I didn't find this. I can't pretend I don't feel this connection. Something in me has always been searching for this place, even before I knew it existed." They made their way back through the corridors. The lights dimmed behind them, returning the complex to its sleeping state, but knew he could wake it again whenever he chose. The connection was permanent now, a link between his mind and the ancient systems. When they emerged onto the surface, the shuttle was waiting. The gray landscape looked different to now, less barren, more like a garden that had been waiting for spring. "What are you going to tell the captain?" asked. Considered. "I'll tell him we found some ruins, some salvage, nothing special. He won't ask too many questions as long as there's profit in it." "And what about me? What am I supposed to do with what I saw?" "Turn to face her. You have a choice. You can tell everyone. You can sell this information to the highest bidder. There are plenty of governments and corporations that would pay fortunes for it. Lord. Or you can help me. Come with me to find the other complexes. Be part of something that could change the galaxy." Was silent for a long moment. Her blue skin seemed paler in the thin light, her expression unreadable. Finally she sighed. "I must be crazy," she said, "but I've been a mercenary for 20 years. I've fought for credits, for survival, for causes I didn't believe in. Maybe it's time I fought for something that matters." Extended his hand. "Welcome to the team." The shuttle ride back to the wandering star was quiet. Stared out the window at the receding moon, knowing that his life would never be the same. He had walked into that complex as coal ship mechanic, a nobody from a nobody species. He was leaving as something else entirely. The knowledge continued to trickle into his mind. He learned that the architects had not been a single species, but a collection of races that had achieved something close to perfection. They had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe, bent reality to their will, created life with the same ease that humans created machines. They had built the first, the ancient paths that made faster-than-light travel possible. Every species in the galaxy owed their place among the stars to the architects. And then, millions of years ago, they had vanished. Some catastrophe, some choice, some evolution beyond physical existence. They had left behind their complexes, their technology, their legacy, all of it waiting for the heir who would one day come to claim it. Had always wondered why humans were different from other species, why they adapted so quickly, learned so fast, dreamed so big. Now he knew. The architect's spark burned in humanity. The scattered bloodline had concentrated over generations, growing stronger, waiting for someone like to emerge. The wandering star came into view, its battered hull a sharp contrast to the sleek ancient structures on the moon below. Felt a strange affection for the old ship. It had carried him to his destiny, however accidentally. "Whatever you're planning," said, "you're going to need more than a broken-down freighter and a soldier with trust issues." "I know," agreed. "We're going to need a crew, people we can trust, people who won't sell us out to the first buyer." "That's a short list." "Then we start with who we have and build from there." The shuttle docked with the wandering star. Captain Vex was waiting in the cargo bay, all four arms crossed impatiently. "Well," the demanded, "what did you find? Please tell me this wasn't a waste of fuel." Pulled a small device from his pocket. He had found it in the complex, a simple data crystal that contained star charts and basic technological schematics. Nothing too advanced, nothing that would reveal the full extent of what he had discovered, just enough to satisfy the captain's greed. "Ruins," said. "Ancient ruins with some salvageable tech. This crystal might be worth something to the right buyer." Vex snatched the crystal and examined it. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the data. "These coordinates, these are uncharted systems, and this technology, I've never seen anything like it." "Worth the fuel?" asked. "Worth 10 times the fuel, 100 times." Vex looked at with something approaching respect. "How did you find this?" "Lucky guess." Vex did not believe him, could see the suspicion in his eyes, but was too excited about the potential profit to push the issue. He hurried off to plot a course to the nearest trading station, leaving and alone in the cargo bay. "That won't hold him for long," observed. "He'll want to know more. By the time he figures out there's more to know, we'll be gone." Raised an eyebrow. "Gone where?" Pulled out another item he had taken from the complex. This one he had not shown the captain. It was a map, displayed on a thin sheet of flexible metal, showing the location of all 12 architect complexes scattered across the galaxy. "The nearest one is in the Dervish Nebula," he said. 3 weeks at standard speed. But if I can modify the ship's engines using some of the knowledge I'm receiving, we might cut that in half. "You're going to steal the captain's ship." "I prefer to think of it as borrowing, with extreme prejudice." Laughed. It was a short, surprised sound, as if she had not expected to find humor in this situation. "You know, for a mechanic, you're pretty ruthless." "I learned from the best. The architects didn't become the masters of the galaxy by being nice." Over the next few days, worked on the ship's engines with a new understanding. The knowledge flowing into his mind allowed him to see flaws he had never noticed before, inefficiencies that could be corrected with minor adjustments. He improved the fuel consumption by 40%. He boosted the speed by almost double. He even fixed that stubborn wiring on the bridge. Captain Vex noticed the improvements but attributed them to the new technology from the ruins. He was too busy planning how to spend his newfound wealth to question too closely. Meanwhile, and planned their departure. They would wait until the ship docked at the trading station, then slip away while the captain was busy with negotiations. It was not elegant, but it would work. The night before they reached the station, could not sleep. He lay in his cramped quarters, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his new responsibility. The architects had entrusted their legacy to humanity, to him specifically. What if he was not worthy? What if he made the wrong choices? The voice spoke in his mind, softer now, more personal. "Doubt is natural. It is what separates the wise from the foolish. The foolish rush in without question. The wise consider, plan, prepare." "Are you always going to be in my head?" asked aloud. "I am a fragment of the whole, a guide left behind to help the Heir navigate the path. I will be with you until you no longer need me." "And when will that be?" "When you have grown into what you are meant to become." Closed his eyes. "What if I don't want this? What if I just want to go back to being a mechanic?" "You can never go back. The awakening has begun. The spark within you will grow whether you nurture it or not. The only choice is whether you guide its growth or let it consume you." That was not comforting, but it was honest, appreciated honesty. "Tell me about the other complexes," he said. "What will I find there?" "Each complex holds a different aspect of our legacy. The first, which you found, is the heart. It connects all the others. The second, in the Dervish Nebula, is the mind. It contains our accumulated knowledge, every discovery we ever made. And the others? The hand, the eye, the voice, the shield, the sword, the root, the branch, the seed, the flame, and the shadow. Each must be awakened in turn. Each will grant you new abilities, new understanding." Sat up in bed. "That's going to take years." "Time is of little consequence. The galaxy has millions of years for the Heir. It can wait a few more." But was not sure the galaxy would wait. The collective was a fragile thing, a network of alliances and treaties that barely held together. Wars broke out regularly between species. Resources were fought over. Old grudges festered. If word got out about the architect legacy, it could spark a conflict that would tear civilization apart. He needed to be strategic. He needed to gather allies, build power, prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The knowledge the architects had left was too valuable to remain hidden forever. Eventually, someone would discover it. Better that be ready when that happened. The trading station was a massive structure, a hub where dozens of species came to exchange goods and information. The wandering star docked in one of the cheaper bays, surrounded by similarly battered vessels. Captain Vex practically ran off the ship, eager to find buyers for his newfound treasure. And waited until he was out of sight, then made their move. They had packed light, taking only essential supplies and the tools would need for repairs. The map was safely hidden in his jacket, pressed against his chest. "Where are we going?" asked as they navigated the crowded corridors of the station. "To find a ship," said. "Something small, fast, and anonymous, something that won't attract attention." "That's expensive." "I know," patted another pocket where a small case held a dozen of the data crystals from the complex. Each one contained information worth fortunes to the right buyer. He hated to use them, hated to spread even basic architect knowledge to the galaxy at large, but he needed resources. They found a ship dealer in the lower levels, a greasy with too many teeth and a reputation for asking few questions. Negotiated hard, trading 3 crystals for a small scout ship that had seen better days but had solid engines and a hull that would not fall apart at the first sign of trouble. "Pleasure doing business," the said, counting the crystals with obvious greed. "You need anything else? Weapons, crew, I know people." "Just the ship," said, "and your silence." The smiled, revealing even more teeth. "Silence is included in the price." Did not believe him, but it did not matter. By the time anyone came looking, they would be long gone. The scout ship was named Horizon, a somewhat pretentious name for a vessel that had clearly spent most of its life hauling cargo in the outer systems, but liked it. The name felt appropriate for what he was about to undertake. He spent a few hours making basic repairs and modifications, applying his new knowledge to improve the ship systems. When he was done, the Horizon was faster and more efficient than it had any right to be. Watched him work with a mixture of admiration and unease. "You're different," she said. "The way you move, the way you think, it's like you're becoming someone else." "I'm still me," assured her, "just more." "That's what worries me." Set down his tools and faced her. "I won't lie to you, I don't fully understand what's happening to me, but I know that I have a responsibility now. A responsibility to humanity, to the galaxy, maybe to the universe itself. I need people I can trust. Are you one of them?" Held his gaze for a long moment, then she nodded. "Yeah, I am, but if you start going crazy with power, I reserve the right to shoot you." Laughed. "Fair enough." They launched from the station without incident. The Horizon slipped into the ancient paths that made faster-than-light travel possible. Paths that now knew had been built by the architects, part of their grand design to connect the galaxy. As the stars stretched into lines around them, felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He was still a mechanic at heart. He still loved working with his hands, solving problems, keeping things running. But now his workshop was the galaxy itself, and the machine he needed to fix was civilization. The Dervish Nebula awaited. The mind of the architects awaited. And beyond that, 10 more complexes, each holding pieces of a legacy that could reshape everything. Cole, human mechanic, heir to the architects, pointed his ship toward the future and did not look back. The journey through the took 12 days. Used the time to learn, absorbing the knowledge that continued to flow into his mind. He learned about the architects' history, their rise and their mysterious end. He learned about the technology they had developed, principles that made the current civilization's achievements look like a child's toys. He learned about the other species the architects had seeded across the galaxy, the sparks they had left in various races. Humans were not the only ones who carried architect blood. They had a trace of it, which explained their remarkable physical abilities. They had been given enhanced mental processing, allowing them to perform calculations that would take computers hours. Even they showed signs of architect influence in their adaptive metabolisms. But humans had received something different, something more. The architects had poured the essence of themselves into humanity, creating a species that could one day inherit everything they had built. Other races had been given gifts. Humans had been given potential. "Why us?" asked the voice in his mind during one of their late-night conversations. "What made humans so special?" "You were not special when we found you. You were primitive, barely beginning to use tools, but we saw something in you. A spark of creativity, of adaptability, of sheer stubborn determination that reminded us of ourselves. We chose to nurture that spark. And then you left. We had to leave. Our time in this reality was ending. We could feel ourselves evolving into something that could no longer interact with physical existence. We had two choices: fight the change and destroy ourselves, or embrace it and leave our legacy behind. Where did you go? Somewhere beyond your current understanding, but not gone, not entirely. A part of us remains in the complex, in the knowledge we left behind. A part of us remains in you. Found that both comforting and terrifying. Spent most of the journey training. She ran combat simulations, maintained her weapons, practiced hand-to-hand fighting techniques in the small cargo hold. She was preparing for trouble and appreciated that. Trouble was almost certainly coming. The Dervish Nebula appeared on their sensors on the 11th day. It was a vast cloud of gas and dust, spanning several light-years, filled with young stars and the remains of old ones. Navigation was treacherous. They did not extend into the nebula itself, forcing ships to rely on conventional drives. The complex is near the center, said, studying the map, orbiting a brown dwarf. Of course it is, muttered. Nothing important is ever in an easy location. They entered the nebula, moving carefully through the swirling gases. The horizon sensors were limited in the dense environment, forcing them to rely on visual navigation. Found himself instinctively knowing the path, his connection to the architect legacy guiding him through the chaos. After 2 more days of careful travel, they found it. The brown dwarf was a dim, smoldering mass, barely visible against the nebula's glow, and orbiting it, hidden in the dwarf's electromagnetic shadow, was the second complex. This one was different from the first. Where the heart had been built of spires reaching toward the sky, the mind was a sphere, a perfect orb of dark metal several kilometers in diameter. It hung motionless in space, showing no signs of power or activity. "How do we get in?" asked. Smiled, "The same way I got into the first one. I knock." He brought the horizon close to the sphere's surface and extended his hand toward the. He concentrated, reaching out with the connection that linked him to the architect legacy. The sphere responded. A section of its surface rippled, then opened, revealing a docking bay sized perfectly for a small ship like the Horizon. Guided them in, feeling the bay seal behind them, atmosphere flooding the space. They disembarked onto a smooth floor that felt like polished stone. The interior of the sphere was hollow, filled with structures that rose from every surface like a city turned inside out. Buildings, walkways, towers, all made of the same dark metal, all covered in the circuit-like patterns that was beginning to think of as architect script. "This place is bigger than the first one," observed. "Much bigger. It holds the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that existed for millions of years," said. "It would need to be big." They walked into the sphere city, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. Lights activated as they passed, illuminating structures that had been dark for eons. The air was fresh, the temperature comfortable. Like the heart, the mind had been waiting, patient and ready. At the center of the sphere was a structure that could only be a library. It was a tower that stretched from the inner surface of the sphere to its core, lined with countless alcoves, each containing what looked like data crystals of unimaginable size. Approached the tower's base, where a terminal awaited. He placed his palm against it. "Welcome, Heir," the voice spoke, resonating through the sphere. "You have found the mind. All knowledge is now open to you." Information flooded into his consciousness. It was overwhelming, a torrent of data that threatened to drown him. He cried out, staggering, feeling his brain burn with the effort of containing so much. And then, slowly, the flood subsided. The information organized itself, slotting into mental compartments that had not known existed. He could feel his mind expanding, growing, becoming something more than human. When he opened his eyes, the world looked different. He could see the energy flowing through the complex. He could understand the purpose of every structure, the function of every system. He could read the architect's script as easily as his native language. Was beside him, supporting his weight. "Are you okay?" He paused, searching for the right word. "I'm awake." He straightened, feeling the knowledge settle into place. The mind had given him access to everything. Medicine, engineering, physics, biology, mathematics, philosophy, art. Millions of years of accumulated wisdom now residing in his consciousness. It was terrifying, it was wonderful, it was exactly what he needed. "I know where the other complexes are now," he said. "Not just their locations, but their purposes. I know how to activate them. I know what I need to do." Looked at him with concern. "And what's that?" Smiled, but there was no joy in it, only determination. "I need to prepare humanity for war." The knowledge from the mind changed everything. Understood now why the architects had vanished. They had not died. They had ascended, evolved beyond physical form, becoming something that existed outside normal reality. But before they left, they had seen what was coming. A species from beyond the galaxy's edge, a devouring swarm that consumed everything in its path. The architects had fought them once ago, driving them back into the void between galaxies. But they knew they would return. They always returned. That was why the legacy existed. That was why humanity had been seeded with architect blood. The galaxy needed defenders, and the architects had chosen humans to be those defenders. Stood in the command center of the mind, watching holographic displays that showed the galaxy in perfect detail. Red markers indicated the estimated approach vector of the fleet. According to the architect calculations, they would arrive in less than 50 years. 50 years, said, staring at the display. That's not enough time. It's what we have, replied. The architects thought it would be enough. They believed in humanity. The architects didn't know humans very well. We're good at fighting each other. We're not so good at working together. Could not argue with that. Human history was filled with examples of cooperation failing, of petty differences destroying alliances that should have saved millions. The Galactic Collective was no better. Species that should have been allies were instead rivals, fighting over resources, territory, and pride. He needed to change that, and he had less than half a century to do it. "We need allies," he said. "Real allies, people who understand what's coming and are willing to work together to stop it." Where do we start? Considered. The knowledge in his mind offered countless possibilities. He could reveal the architect legacy to the collective, show them the threat, demand cooperation. But he knew how that would go. The great powers would fight over the technology. They would accuse each other of manufacturing the threat to seize control. By the time they realized the danger was real, it would be too late. No, he needed to build a coalition from the ground up. Start with individuals, with small groups, with species that had been marginalized by the larger powers. Create a network of allies who trusted each other, who shared a common purpose. "We start small," he said. "We find people who are looking for something to believe in. We give them a cause worth fighting for." Over the next 3 years, traveled across the galaxy. He visited the remaining complexes, awakening each one, adding their power and knowledge to his arsenal. The hand gave him the ability to manipulate matter at the atomic level. The eye granted enhanced perception that allowed him to see across vast distances. The voice enabled communication that transcended language, speaking directly to the minds of those he wished to reach. Each complex added to his capabilities. Each one brought him closer to being what the architects had intended. But the power was not for his own benefit. It was a tool, nothing more. A tool to unite the galaxy against the coming darkness. He also gathered allies, remained his most trusted companion, her loyalty proved through countless dangers, but she was not alone. From the prison moons of Tartarus, he recruited a human soldier who had been condemned to death for defying orders that would have killed civilians, was tough, disciplined, and utterly devoted to protecting the innocent. He became military commander, organizing the growing force of volunteers who answered their call. From the slums of Nexus Prime, he found a brilliant scientist who had been blacklisted for her unorthodox theories about faster-than-light travel. Those theories, were actually memories of architect knowledge, filtered through generations with traces of the ancient blood. Became his head of research, adapting architect technology for use by modern species. From the gambling dens of Freeport, he recruited a con artist with an incredible talent for reading people and situations. Had spent his life exploiting the system. Now he used those skills to build networks of informants and supporters across the galaxy. And from the monasteries he found Sister, a spiritual leader who had been preaching for years about an ancient legacy that would one day return to save the galaxy. When appeared before her, she wept with joy, declaring that her visions had finally come true. These 5 became his inner circle, but beyond them, thousands more joined the cause. They came from every species, every world, every walk of life. Soldiers, scientists, workers, artists, all of them drawn by the message spread, quietly at first, then with increasing boldness. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy, but humanity would lead the way. The powers that betook notice. The collective council summoned to their great chamber on the capital world of Harmony, demanding to know who he was and what he was doing. Went, but not as a supplicant. He walked into the council chamber wearing simple clothes, the same kind of practical gear he had worn as a ship mechanic. He had no guards, no weapons, no display of power. Just himself, a human from a backwater world, standing before the representatives of 100 species. Cole, High Counselor, spoke, his ancient form draped in ceremonial robes. You have been stirring up trouble across our collective. You have been making claims about ancient legacies and coming threats. You have been recruiting military forces without authorization. What do you have to say for yourself? Looked around the chamber. The representatives watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Humans had only been part of the collective for 200 years. They were still considered newcomers, barely worthy of notice. I have much to say, replied, but first let me ask a question. What do you know about the architects? The chamber erupted in murmurs. The architects were a myth, a legend that most serious scholars dismissed as primitive attempts to explain the origins of the. No one believed they had actually existed. Fairy tales, Counselor of the said dismissively. Stories told to frighten children. You cannot seriously expect us to listen to such nonsense. That carry your ships were built by the architects, said. The energy principles that power your worlds were discovered by the architects. The genetic markers that give their strength and their mental abilities were placed in your ancestors by the architects. Everything you have, everything you are, comes from them. Ridiculous claims, High Counselor said. Do you have proof? Smiled, I have more than proof. I have their legacy. He raised his hand. The circuits beneath his skin, barely visible until now, began to glow with golden light. The energy spread through his body, lifting him off the ground, surrounding him with an aura of power that made several counselors cry out in fear. The architects left 12 complexes across the galaxy, spoke, his voice resonating with the power of the voice. Each one contains technology and knowledge beyond anything you possess. I have awakened them all. I am the heir they waited for. The chamber was silent. Even the most skeptical counselors could not deny what they were seeing. This was not a trick, not an illusion. This was real power, ancient power, power that made their greatest weapons look like toys. Why are you telling us this? High Counselor asked, his voice trembling slightly. "What do you want?" Lowered himself back to the ground. The glow faded, leaving him looking once again like an ordinary human. "I want to save the galaxy," he said. "The architects did not leave their legacy for my benefit. They left it because they knew what was coming. A threat from beyond our galaxy, a swarm of creatures that devour everything in their path. They drove these creatures back once, but the creatures are returning. They will arrive in less than 50 years, and if we are not ready, they will destroy everything." The counselors exchanged looks of disbelief. A threat from beyond the galaxy. It sounded like more fairy tale-ese. "Even if what you say is true," Counselor said, "what can we do? 50 years is not enough time to prepare for such a threat." 50 years is enough if we work together, said. "The architect technology can be shared. Your scientists, working with mine, can develop weapons and defenses that will give us a fighting chance. But only if we cooperate. Only if we put aside our differences and unite." "You ask us to trust a human," another counselor said, her tone dripping with contempt. "A species that has barely mastered interstellar travel, a species that has contributed nothing of value to our collective." Felt a flash of anger but controlled it. He had expected this reaction. Humans were looked down upon by most of the older species. It was one of the things he intended to change. "I ask you to trust evidence," he said calmly. "I am offering to share architect knowledge with your scientists. Let them study it. Let them verify my claims. If I am lying, you will know. If I am telling the truth, you will have the proof you need." High Counselor stroked his chin thoughtfully. "And what do you want in return for this knowledge?" "Only cooperation. A unified command structure that can coordinate our defense. An end to the petty conflicts that drain our resources. A commitment from every species to contribute what they can to the coming fight." "You ask us to surrender our sovereignty. I ask you to survive." The vote took 3 days. 3 days of arguments, negotiations, accusations, and counter-accusations. Species that had been rivals for centuries refused to consider working together. Representatives walked out in protest, only to return when they realized the alternative was being left out of whatever arrangement was made. In the end, the council agreed to a compromise. They would form a joint committee to study the architect technology and verify claims about the coming threat. If the evidence supported his story, they would consider further cooperation. It was not the unified command had hoped for, but it was a start. He left Harmony with a small victory and a massive task ahead of him. The committee would take years to complete its work, years that he could use to continue building his coalition, strengthening the forces that would be needed when the truth could no longer be. The Horizon had been replaced by a much larger vessel, a cruiser that had assembled using architect technology. He called it the Unity, a name that reflected his hope for the galaxy's future. It carried a crew of several hundred, drawn from a dozen species, all loyal to the cause. Met him in the briefing room as soon as he returned. "How did it go?" "About as expected," said. "They're afraid. Afraid of the threat, afraid of the technology, afraid of what it means for their power. But fear can be useful. It can be shaped into something productive. Or it can drive them to do something stupid." Nodded. "That's why we need to be ready. Double the training schedule. I want every soldier we have prepared for combat within the year." "We don't have enough ships," pointed out, "or weapons or supplies. We're building an army with nothing." "We're building an army with everything the architects left us. I've been studying the Forge." The Forge was the fourth complex had awakened, a massive manufacturing facility hidden in the heart of a dead star. It was capable of producing ships, weapons, and equipment on a scale that dwarfed anything in the collective. But it needed raw materials, vast quantities of metal and energy that did not yet have access to. "Has been working on that," said. "He's made contacts with several mining consortiums that are willing to deal with us outside official channels. for the right price. And where do we get the price? Smiled. The architect data crystals. I've been careful not to release anything too advanced, but there's plenty of basic technology that the collective would pay fortunes for. Improved engine designs, more efficient power systems, medical advances that could save billions of lives. Raised an eyebrow. You're going to sell architect technology. I'm going to trade it, knowledge for resources. It's the only way to build what we need in time. The trade began in earnest. Selected technologies carefully, things that would improve lives without creating dangerous imbalances of power. Medical treatments that could cure diseases thought to be incurable. Agricultural advances that could feed billions on worlds that struggled with famine. Energy systems that were clean and efficient. In return, he received raw materials, credits, and something even more valuable: gratitude. The species that benefited from architect technology began to see humans in a new light. Perhaps these newcomers were not as insignificant as everyone thought. The research committee completed its work in 2 years, faster than had expected. The lead scientist, a named professor, presented the findings to the council with barely concealed excitement. The technology is genuine, reported. Our analysis confirms it is far beyond anything currently possible. The material compositions, the energy signatures, the fundamental principles involved. All of it points to a civilization that was millions of years ahead of our own. And the threat? High Counselor asked. What of the claims about creatures from beyond the galaxy? His antennae twitched nervously. We have been monitoring the region of space indicated by the architect records. Our long-range sensors have detected something. A disturbance in the void between galaxies. Something is moving toward us. Something vast. The chamber fell silent. Even the most skeptical counselors could not dismiss the evidence of their own sensors. How long? Asked. At current speed, approximately 47 years until arrival. But there are indications that the approach is accelerating. The final estimate could be as low as 40 years. 40 years, less than a human lifetime, less than a blink of an eye for some of the longer-lived species. Stood before the council once again. You have your proof. The threat is real. The question now is what you intend to do about it. The debates that followed were fierce. Some counselors advocated for surrender, arguing that no force could stand against something that had caused the architects themselves to flee. Others proposed reaching out to the approaching threat, attempting diplomacy before conflict. You cannot negotiate with said flatly. They do not communicate in any way we understand. They do not have goals or desires beyond consumption. They are a force of nature, a swarm that devours everything and moves on. The only language they understand is force. And you expect us to believe that humans can lead the defense? Counselor demanded. Your species is young, inexperienced, limited. Why should we follow you? Felt the old anger rising but kept his voice calm. I don't expect you to follow me because I'm human. I expect you to follow me because I'm the only one who can access the architect legacy. I'm the only one who can activate the weapons and defenses they left behind. Without me, all that technology is useless. Then share the access, another counselor suggested. Give us the ability to use the technology ourselves. I can't. The architects designed their systems to respond only to their bloodline, only to me. It's not a choice, it's a biological fact. The implications of that statement hung in the air. Every species in the chamber understood what it meant. Cole, this unknown human mechanic, held the key to the galaxy's survival. Without him, they had no chance. It was a terrifying amount of power for one person to hold. Felt the weight of it every day. The knowledge that the wrong decision, the wrong move, could doom trillions of lives. But he also knew that he had not asked for this power. It had been thrust upon him by beings who had seen something in humanity worth saving. He could not betray that trust. "I will lead the defense," he said, "but I will not rule. I have no interest in power for its own sake. When the threat is defeated, the architect technology will be shared equally among all species. The complexes will be open to everyone. The knowledge will become the inheritance of the entire galaxy, not just humanity." "And if we refuse to follow your lead?" asked. "Then you will die, we will all die. They will consume this galaxy and move on to the next, and everything we have ever built will be forgotten. That is the choice. Follow me and live. Refuse and perish." It was not diplomacy. It was not subtle. But it was the truth, and sometimes the truth was the only argument that mattered. The council voted to accept leadership of the defense. Not unanimously, not without protest, but enough to establish a unified command. The coalition, as it came to be called, began to take shape. The years that followed were a blur of activity. The forge operated around the clock, producing ships and weapons at an impossible rate. Training facilities were established on dozens of worlds, turning civilians into soldiers, soldiers into officers, officers into commanders. Oversaw everything, his mind enhanced by the knowledge of 1,000,000 years, his body strengthened by the spark of the architects. He slept only a few hours a night, eating when he remembered, pushing himself to the limits of human endurance. His inner circle worried about him, confronted him one evening in his quarters, finding him staring at star charts that showed the latest estimates of the approach. "You're killing yourself," she said bluntly. "You can't do everything, you need to trust others." "I trust you," replied without looking up. I trust the commanders we've trained, the soldiers we've equipped. But in the end, the responsibility is mine. The architects chose me. If we fail, it will be my failure." That's exactly the kind of thinking that will cause us to fail. You're one person, one human. You can't carry the entire galaxy on your shoulders. He finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, lined with shadows that had not been there a few years ago. The spark of the architects burned within him, but even that power could not prevent the toll of endless stress. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Take a vacation, relax on some beach while they get closer every day." "I want you to remember why you're doing this. Not just to stop the threat, to save lives, to give people hope. You can't give them hope if you become a hollow shell, driven only by duty." Was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, a small smile crossing his face. "You're right. I've been so focused on the destination that I've forgotten to appreciate the journey." "Now you sound like one of sermons." "She's not wrong. None of you are. I've been carrying this burden alone because I thought I had to. But that's not what leadership means. Leadership means trusting others to share the weight." From that point on, made a conscious effort to delegate more responsibility. He allowed his commanders to make decisions without his direct oversight. He spent time with the soldiers, eating in the mess halls, listening to their concerns, reminding himself of what they were fighting for. He also began to explore the personal connections he had neglected. He had developed a bond over the years, a partnership that went beyond friendship. One night, as they watched the stars from the observation deck of the Unity, he told her things he had never told anyone. His fears, his doubts, his hopes for a future he was not sure he would live to see. Listened without judgment, without offering easy comfort. When he was done, she simply took his hand. "Whatever happens," she said, "you won't face it alone." It was not a declaration of love, not in the dramatic way of stories and songs, but it was something more valuable, a promise of companionship, of shared purpose, of standing together against whatever darkness awaited. 20 years passed. The coalition grew stronger, more unified, more prepared. The old rivalries between species faded as the common threat became impossible to ignore. Ships rolled out of the forge by the thousands. Soldiers trained until they could fight in their sleep. Scientists pushed the boundaries of what was possible, adapting architect technology in ways even had not anticipated. And they came closer. The first scouts arrived ahead of the main swarm, probing the galaxy's defenses, testing for weaknesses. They were smaller than the reports had suggested, organic ships that moved like living things, bristling with weapons that analysis. The first battle was fought in the outer reaches of the galaxy, where a coalition fleet intercepted a scouting force. Was not present for the fight. He was coordinating the defense from the Unity, thousands of light years away. But he watched the feeds, saw the chaos of combat, felt every loss as if it were a personal blow. The coalition won that battle, but at a terrible cost. 30 ships destroyed, thousands of lives lost, and the enemy had barely committed a fraction of their forces. They were testing us, reported after the battle, seeing how we fight, what weapons we use, how we respond to their tactics. The main swarm will be different. They'll adapt. Then we need to adapt faster, said. What did we learn? Stepped forward with her analysis. Their organic technology is vulnerable to certain energy frequencies that we didn't expect. I believe I can modify our weapons to exploit this weakness. It will take time, but it could give us a significant advantage. Do it, whatever resources you need. The modifications were implemented across the fleet over the next 2 years. When they returned with a larger force, the coalition was ready. The battle was still brutal, still costly, but the kill ratio had shifted dramatically in their favor. Allowed himself a moment of hope. Perhaps they could actually win this. Perhaps the architects had been right to trust humanity. But they were learning too. Each battle taught them more about coalition tactics and technology. They adapted their ships, their weapons, their strategies. The advantage that modifications had provided began to diminish. It became a race, innovation against evolution, technology against biology. Neither side could land a decisive blow. The battles continued year after year, world after world, a war of attrition that threatened to exhaust both sides. Knew something had to change. The coalition was giving everything it had, but it was not enough. They needed an advantage so overwhelming that they could not adapt to it. He found it in the shadow. The shadow was the last of the architect complexes, hidden in a region of space so dark and empty that it avoided it for decades. The other complexes had been designed for creation, for knowledge, for power. The shadow was designed for destruction. It was a weapon of last resort, something the architects had never used and had hoped would never be needed. A device that could tear holes in reality itself, creating voids that would swallow anything within them, including the. Studied the shadow for months, learning its systems, understanding its capabilities. The weapon was powerful beyond imagination, but it was also dangerous beyond measure. A mistake in its use could destroy not just the enemy but the entire galaxy. He shared his findings with his inner circle, watching their faces as they comprehended what he was proposing. "You're talking about wielding the power of gods," whispered. "I'm talking about saving everything we've built," replied. "They will not stop. They cannot stop. It's their nature. We can fight them for centuries, wear ourselves down to nothing, and they will still keep coming. The only way to end this is to end them, completely, forever." "And if you make a mistake?" asked. Met his eyes. "Then at least we died fighting, instead of waiting to be devoured." The decision was made. The coalition would make one final stand, committing everything they had to a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy, and at the critical moment would activate the shadow. He only hoped it would be enough. The staging ground for the final battle was a dead system at the edge of the galaxy, 3 stars that had burned out long ago, leaving behind cold rocks and empty space. Had chosen it carefully, far enough from inhabited worlds that collateral damage would be minimal, close enough to the approach vector that they would have to come through it. The coalition fleet gathered, the largest armada in galactic history. Ships from every species, every world that had answered the call. Millions of soldiers, ready to fight and die for a future they might never see, stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching the fleet take position, feeling the weight of command press down on his shoulders. Stood beside him as she always did. Her blue skin had gained a few more scars over the years, marks of the battles they had fought together. She was older now, slower than she had been, but her eyes were still sharp, her spirit still unbroken. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "A million of them," admitted, "but none that change anything." The final reports came in from the scouts. The main swarm was approaching, a mass of organic ships so vast it blocked out the stars behind it. There were millions of them, maybe billions. No one had ever tried to count. At the center of the swarm was the Nexus, the central intelligence that coordinated the hive mind. Kill the Nexus, and the swarm would become disorganized, vulnerable. It was the key to victory. It was also the most heavily defended target in the enemy fleet. Addressed the coalition forces through a galaxy-wide broadcast, his voice carried across light years by the power of the voice. "Today we face the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known. They have consumed countless worlds, extinguished countless species. They believe we will be just another meal, just another galaxy to devour and forget. They are wrong. We are the children of the architects. We carry their spark, their determination, their refusal to surrender to darkness. Every species gathered here today shares that heritage. We are not prey. We are hunters. Some of us will die today, perhaps many of us, but those who fall will be remembered. They will be honored, and their sacrifice will ensure that future generations live free. They have never lost. Today that changes. Today we show them what the galaxy can do when it stands united. Today we make them fear. All ships engage." The battle began. It was chaos from the first moment. The swarmed forward, their organic ships moving with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. They fired biological weapons that ate through shields, launched living missiles that sought out engine signatures, rammed ships with kamikaze attacks that cost them little but devastated their targets. The coalition responded with everything they had. Energy weapons adapted to exploit vulnerabilities cut through enemy formations. Fighters darted between the larger ships, targeting weak points, disrupting the swarm's coordination. Capital ships unleashed barrages that lit up the void with destruction. Watched the battle unfold from the Unity's bridge, making adjustments, issuing orders, directing the flow of combat like a conductor leading an orchestra of death. The architect knowledge in his mind allowed him to see patterns that others missed, anticipate movements before they happened, exploit weaknesses before they could be corrected. But they were adaptive. They learned from every attack, evolved defenses against every weapon. What worked in the first hour became useless in the second. The coalition forces began to take heavier losses, ships dying faster than they could be replaced. "We're losing," reported from his command ship. "They're adapting too fast. We need to reach the Nexus now or this is over." Nodded, the time had come. "All ships clear a path to the Nexus. The Unity is going in." The coalition fleet responded with a coordinated push, concentrating their fire on a narrow corridor through the swarm. Ships died by the hundreds, sacrificing themselves to create an opening. The Unity surged forward, its engines burning at maximum, its shields straining against the constant barrage. Was at the weapons station, her fingers flying across the controls. Multiple contacts incoming. Heavy cruisers or whatever the equivalent is. "Target their propulsion," ordered. "Slow them down, don't try to kill them." The Unity's weapons blazed, precisely aimed shots crippling enemy ships without destroying them. The focused on the total kill did not expect such restraint. The crippled ships drifted, blocking the path of those behind them, creating a temporary obstacle that bought the Unity precious seconds. The Nexus was visible now, a massive organic structure at the heart of the swarm. It pulsed with bioluminescent light, signals that coordinated the movements of billions of units. Around it, the densest concentration of defenders formed a living wall. "We'll never break through that," someone said. "We don't have to break through," replied. "We just have to get close enough." He had prepared for this moment for decades. The shadow was installed in the Unity's core, its dark systems waiting for his command. He had studied every calculation, every parameter, prepared for every contingency. The weapon would create a void that would swallow the Nexus and everything around it, cutting off from their central intelligence. But the range was limited. He needed to be close, very close. The Unity pushed deeper into the swarm, taking damage from every direction. Sections of the ship were breached, emergency bulkheads slamming shut to contain the atmosphere. Crew members died at their stations, killed by weapons that should not have been able to penetrate their defenses. "Hull integrity at 40%, the chief engineer reported. "We can't take much more." "Just a little further," said. "Hold together just a little longer." The ship groaned and shuddered, metal screaming under stresses it was never designed to handle. Could feel the Unity dying around him, its systems failing one by one. But he could also feel the Nexus, vast and alien, broadcasting its commands to the swarm. "I'm close enough," he said. "All hands, this is your captain. Evacuate to the secondary craft. I'm staying behind to activate the weapon." "No," said immediately. "If you're staying, I'm staying." "Please." "Don't." Her voice was fierce, unyielding. "We started this together. We finish it together." Looked at her, seeing the woman who had stood by his side through everything. The soldier, the partner, the friend. The person who had kept him human when the power of the architects threatened to consume him. He did not argue, he simply nodded. The evacuation was chaotic but efficient. The crew had trained for this, knowing that the final battle might require sacrifices beyond the ordinary. They boarded escape pods and shuttles, fleeing the dying ship, trusting their captain to finish what they had started. Within minutes, only, and remained on the bridge. "The weapon is ready," said, his hands hovering over the controls. "Once I activate it, we'll have about 30 seconds before the void engulfs us." 30 seconds is a long time, said, long enough to say goodbye. Smiled despite everything. "I never imagined it would end like this. A mechanic from Earth dying to save the galaxy sounds like something out of a bad story." "It's not a bad story, it's a great story, the kind that gets told for thousands of years," took his hand. "Whatever happens after this, know that you did something incredible. You brought the galaxy together. You gave everyone hope. That's worth any price." Squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. Then he turned to the controls. "The Heir HFY," the architect voice spoke in his mind, stronger than it had been in years. "WHY?" "Because I'm afraid," admitted silently. "Not of dying, of failing, of all of this being for nothing. Fear is natural, but you are not alone. You have never been alone. We are with you. We have always been with you." And suddenly felt them. The architects, not as a distant memory but as a living presence. They had not truly left. They had been waiting, watching, hoping that their heir would prove worthy of the trust they had placed in humanity. "We believe in you," they said, their voice resonating with the power of a million minds. "We believe in humanity. You are ready. You have always been ready." Activated the shadow. The void opened. It was nothing like had expected. He had studied the theory, understood the mathematics, prepared for the raw destruction, but experiencing it was something else entirely. Reality itself began to tear, a hole opening in the fabric of existence that was blacker than any darkness he had ever seen. It grew rapidly, consuming everything in its path. Ships vanished without a trace, erased from existence as if they had never been. The Nexus screamed. It was a psychic sound, a wave of terror and rage that washed over the entire system. The swarm went mad, ships attacking each other, running in random directions, their coordination shattered. Watched the void expand, swallowing the Nexus whole. The central intelligence of the disappeared, and with it, any hope the swarm had of mounting a coherent defense. "It's working," breathed. It was, but the void was also expanding toward the unity. Could see it approaching, an absolute nothingness that would consume them just as it had consumed the enemy. "The price must be paid," the architect voice said, "but the price need not be your life." "What do you mean?" "We have one final gift for you, Marcus Cole, a gift we had hoped you would never need, but you have earned it." Power surged through, more than he had ever felt before. The spark of the architects blazed within him, connecting him to the void, making him part of it. He suddenly understood what the architects were offering. They were offering their own power, their own essence, the final reserves they had held back for. Power that could close the void before it consumed him. "If we do this, we will truly be gone," they said. "The last echo of the ARCHITCTS will fade from existence. You will be alone." "I won't be alone," replied, looking at. "I'll have my friends, my family, my people." "Then use our gift, close the void, save yourself, save the galaxy." Reached out with his mind, grasping the edges of the tier in reality. The void fought him, trying to pull him in, trying to consume him as it had consumed everything else. But he held firm, pouring the architect's power into the effort slowly, painfully, forcing the void to shrink. The Nexus was gone. Millions of ships were gone. The threat that had loomed over the galaxy for centuries was being erased from existence. And was dying. The effort was too much, even with the architect's gift. He could feel his body failing, his mind fragmenting, the spark that made him who he was beginning to flicker. Was beside him, holding him up as he collapsed. "Stay with me." "Close it," he gasped. "I have to close it." He made one final push, throwing everything he had into the void. The tier shrank, faster now, collapsing in on itself. The blackness faded. The stars returned. And then there was nothing. Floated in emptiness. No body, no form, just consciousness drifting in a void that was somehow different from the one he had just closed. It was warm, peaceful, filled with a light that had no source. "Where am I?" he asked. "Between," a voice answered. It was the architect's, but changed, fainter, more distant. "Between life and death, between what was and what will be." "Am I dead?" "Not yet. You have a choice. You can stay here with us, become one with the essence of the ARCHITCTS, or you can return, live out your life, complete the work you started." Considered, it would be easy to stay, to rest, finally, after so many years of struggle, to join the architects in whatever existence they had found beyond the physical world. But he thought of the billions of people who had fought and died for a future they believed in. He thought of Earth, a tiny blue planet that had produced a species capable of saving the galaxy. "I want to go back," he said. "There's more work to do." "We knew you would say that. Marcus Cole, heir of the ARCHITCTS, you have proven worthy of everything we gave you. Go, live, remember us." The light faded. The warmth receded, and felt himself falling back into a body that hurt in ways he had never imagined. He opened his eyes to find himself in a medical bay. White lights, clean surfaces, the soft beep of monitoring equipment. Was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand still holding his. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He squeezed her hand instead. His eyes snapped open instantly. "Hey," he managed to croak. She burst into tears, something he had never seen her do in all the years he had known her. She leaned down and kissed him, hard and desperate, pouring all her fear and relief into that single moment. "Don't you ever do that again," she said when she finally pulled away. No promises. The days that followed were a blur of recovery and celebration. The swarm, cut off from the Nexus, had become easy prey. Coalition forces hunted them down, eliminating the remaining clusters, ensuring that none would survive to regenerate the threat. The war was over, the galaxy was saved. And Cole was hailed as its savior. He rejected the title. He rejected the statues, the songs, the offers of power and prestige. He had not fought for glory. He had fought because it was the right thing to do. What he did accept was the responsibility to help rebuild. The architect complexes were open to all species, their knowledge shared freely. Scientists from across the galaxy worked together, developing technologies that would improve countless lives. The divisions that had once separated species began to fade, replaced by a sense of common purpose. Oversaw much of this work, but he also stepped back. He trained successors, delegated authority, ensured that the coalition would continue without him. He was not immortal, despite everything. One day he would be gone. The galaxy needed to be ready for that day. 15 years after the final battle, retired. He bought a small farm on a quiet world, far from the centers of power, and settled down to live out his remaining years in peace. Came with him, of course. They had been inseparable since the day they met in that ancient crypt, and they would be inseparable until the end. The farm was simple. Grew vegetables, repaired equipment when it broke, watched the sunsets from a porch he had built with his own hands. It was not the life of a galactic hero. It was the life of an ordinary person, and that was exactly what he wanted. Sometimes visitors came. Old friends from the war, young people who wanted to hear stories from the source, dignitaries who felt they owed him personal gratitude. Received them all with warmth, shared what wisdom he had, sent them on their way with encouragement for the future. One evening, as the sun was setting over the fields, a young human woman arrived at the farm. She was nervous, clutching a data pad to her chest, looking at with eyes that were almost worshipful. "Mr. Cole," she asked, "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm a student at the academy. I'm writing a thesis on the architect legacy." Smiled and gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit down. What would you like to know?" "Everything," she admitted. "But mainly, how did you do it? How did you go from being a mechanic to saving the galaxy?" Was quiet for a long moment, watching the colors spread across the sky. Then he spoke. "I didn't save the galaxy. We did. Every soldier who fought, every scientist who worked, every person who refused to give up hope. I was just the one who started the fire. They were the ones who kept it burning. But the architects chose you. You had the power, the knowledge, the ability to access their technology. You were special." Shook his head. "The architects didn't choose me because I was special. They chose me because I was human. And every human is special in their own way. Every species is. We all carry sparks of potential, waiting to be ignited. The architects just gave me the match." The young woman wrote furiously, capturing every word. "What do you think the architects would say if they could see the galaxy now?" Closed his eyes, reaching for a connection that had been silent for 15 years. To his surprise, he felt something. Not the powerful presence he had known during the war, but a faint echo, a distant warmth that spoke of approval. "I think they would be proud," he said. "Not just of me, of all of us. We faced the darkness and we won. We built something worth building. We became what they always hoped we would become." "And what's that?" "A family. The entire galaxy working together, caring for each other, striving toward a better future. That was their dream. That's what they left their legacy for. Not power, not weapons, connection, unity, love." The sun set. The stars came out, countless points of light representing countless worlds, countless species, countless lives that had been saved by the courage of a few. Leaned back in his chair, feeling's hand slip into his as she joined him on the porch. The young woman continued asking questions, and continued answering, sharing the wisdom of a lifetime spent in service to something greater than himself. He was no longer the heir of the architects. That role had ended when the last of their essence faded, used up in closing the void. He was just Cole now, a retired farmer with too many stories and not enough time to tell them all. But that was enough. It had always been enough. The story of the human mechanic who whispered in a forgotten crypt and was answered by an ancient voice would be told for thousands of years. It would inspire generations, drive young people to dream bigger, push civilizations to reach higher. It would become a legend, and like all legends, it would grow with each telling. But at its heart, it would remain the truth. A simple truth spoken by a simple man to anyone who would listen. Humanity was not just another species in a crowded galaxy. Humanity was special, not because of power or knowledge or destiny, but because of something far more fundamental. The spark of potential that burned in every human heart, the refusal to accept that anything was impossible, the determination to stand up against the darkness no matter the odds. The architects had seen that spark 1,000,000 years ago, in a primitive species on a small blue planet. They had nurtured it, protected it, waited for it to grow into a flame that would light the entire galaxy. And it had. Against all odds, against all expectations, humanity had risen to meet its destiny. Cole, mechanic, farmer, heir, hero, closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of the peaceful night. Somewhere in the distance, a bird was singing. The wind rustled through the crops. Breathing was slow and steady beside him. He had done his part. Now it was up to others to carry the flame forward. And they would. He had no doubt of that. The galaxy had learned to stand together, and it would never forget that lesson. The darkness might return someday in some form, but when it did, there would be heroes ready to face it. Not because they had ancient powers or cosmic destinies, but because they were human. Because humanity had shown the galaxy what was possible when ordinary people refused to give up. That was the true legacy of the architects. Not the technology or the knowledge or the complexes scattered across the stars. It was the proof, written in the history of one small species, that determination and courage could overcome any obstacle. Smiled, feeling the peace that had eluded him for so many years finally settle into his bones. "Thank you," he whispered to the stars, to the architects, to everyone who had made this moment possible. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the cosmos, he could have sworn he heard a voice whisper back, "No, thank you." The story ended where it had begun, with a whisper and a response. But everything between those two moments had changed the galaxy forever. And that thought was a story worth telling. Years passed, grew old, truly old, his body finally catching up with all the years of strain and sacrifice. But he was not afraid. He had seen what lay beyond, and he knew it was not an ending, just a transition, a step into something new. When the end came, it came gently. Was sitting on his porch, watching another sunset, holding his hand. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, a masterpiece that no artist could ever hope to match. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "It is," agreed. Her voice was thick with tears, but she was smiling, just like every sunset we've watched together. "I love you." "I know I love you too." Closed his eyes. The spark that had burned within him for so long, the last echo of the architects, flickered one final time, and then peacefully it went out. But the flame he had ignited in the galaxy continued to burn. It burned in the ships that patrolled the borders, protecting worlds from threats both known and unknown. It burned in the laboratories where scientists pushed the boundaries of possibility. It burned in the hearts of every being who looked up at the stars and saw not emptiness, but potential. Cole was gone, but his legacy lived on. And somewhere in a realm beyond time and space, the architects welcomed their heir home. "You did well," they said. "I did my best," replied. "Was it enough?" The architects smiled, or did whatever passed for smiling in their transcendent state. Look and see. They showed him the galaxy not as it was, but as it would become. Thousands of years of peace and progress, species working together, spreading across the universe, reaching toward goals that had once seemed impossible. A civilization built on the principles he had fought for: unity, cooperation, hope. It was enough, he said, wonder filling his voice. It was more than enough. You gave them the spark they needed. The rest they did themselves. Nodded, understanding at last. He had not been chosen because he was the only one who could save the galaxy. He had been chosen because he was the one who could show others how to save themselves. That was the true power of the Heir, not the ability to command ancient technology or wield cosmic forces, but the ability to inspire, to lead, to bring out the best in everyone around him. And that power, realized, was not unique to him. It was in every being who chose to stand up for what was right. Every person who refused to accept that darkness was inevitable. Every heart that dared to hope for a better tomorrow. The architects had known this. They had always known this. That was why they had scattered their bloodline across so many species, planted their spark in so many souls. Because they knew that when the time came, heroes would rise to meet the challenge. Had been one of those heroes, but he would not be the last. The story of the human mechanic would inspire millions, and from those millions, new heroes would emerge. New stories would be written. New legends would be born. The flame would never die. Rest now, the architects said. You have earned it. And did. He rested, surrounded by the warmth of beings who had loved him, who had believed in him, who would remember him forever. The galaxy spun on through the void, no longer alone, no longer afraid. The darkness had been beaten back, and in its place, light shone brighter than ever before. All because a mechanic had whispered in a forgotten crypt, and an ancient voice had boomed in response. The Heir has returned. And the Heir had delivered.